Once upon a time, there was a kind king who ruled over a happy and rich kingdom. He loved his people and worked hard to keep them safe and well. Everyone admired him. The king had a wise minister. The king often took his advice. But the king had one problem: he would get angry very easily. One day, the king decided to visit the capital to see how his people were living. He wanted to make sure everyone was living well. He and his minister rode through the busy streets, smiling at the cheerful faces of their citizens. The market was full of fresh fruits and vegetables, and children were playing happily. As they walked, a poor man with torn clothes approached the king. He looked sad and tired.
"Your Majesty,"
the man said with tears in his eyes,
"I need your help. My family has no food, and my children are sick. We don't know how to survive."
The king's heart softened at the man's plea.
"Tell me, what do you need?"
the king asked kindly. The poor man replied,
"A little food, Your Majesty. Just enough to feed my children."
The king turned to his minister and said,
"Make sure this man's family has enough food and medicine for the next month. No one in my kingdom should suffer like this."
The minister quickly arranged for food and helped to be sent to the man's home. The poor man fell to his knees and thanked the king over and over.
"You are a blessing to this land,"
he said. The king smiled warmly and said,
"I rule to help my people. Go, and may your family be well again soon."
One night, the king and queen were in her chamber, the room lit by candles. The king, with a proud smile, said,
"I wrote a new poem. I hope you like it."
He began to recite the poem. He wanted the queen to enjoy his words as much as he did. As he read, the queen felt very sleepy. She tried hard to stay awake, because she didn't want to make her husband angry. But soon, she couldn't control it and let out a big yawn. The king noticed and immediately stopped. His face turned red with anger.
"You yawned while I was sharing my poem!"
he shouted. The queen felt embarrassed and tried to explain, but the king turned away. Without saying anything else, he stormed out of the room. For 2 days, the king didn't talk to the queen. He stayed away from her chamber and spent time alone in his study. The queen felt sad and she missed him. She often stood by the window, hoping to see him, but he never came. The queen wished for him to return and forgive her. One day, the minister was resting at his home. A servant of the palace came and said,
"I come from the queen. She is in some trouble. She wants to meet you."
The servant departed. Without wasting time, the minister dressed in his formal attire and hurried to the palace. A servant led him to the queen's chamber, where she was waiting. He bowed before the queen and asked,
"O Queen, how may I serve you?"
The queen said,
"Please help me. I'm in big trouble."
The minister comforted her and said gently,
"Just tell me the problem. I am at your service."
The queen sighed deeply.
"I have made the king angry,"
she confessed. The minister frowned and asked,
"But why?"
The queen replied,
"One day the king was reading out a poem written by him to me. I happened to yawn during the recital. The king felt offended. Since then, he has not talked to me. And he has not visited my chamber. What should I do?"
Don't worry. The king's behavior will become normal again.
the minister said and went back. At home, the minister sat in deep thought. He knew the king's anger wouldn't fade away easily.
The king's anger will not go away soon.
He thought,
What can I do to bring them back together?
he rubbed his chin, thinking of a good plan. Suddenly, he smiled and said to himself,
Oh, I have got an idea.
The next day, the king was discussing wheat production in his court.
This year we have less production. We must do something about it.
The king said. The minister extended his palm towards the king. There were 3 to 4 grains of wheat on it. He said,
Your Majesty, these can increase wheat production to 3 times.
The king looked puzzled. Some ministers laughed. Others thought it could be some joker act.
That would be a real miracle. How much land and manure would it require?
The king asked.
A square yard of land and a fistful of cow dung manure will be enough.
Then, you can grow it in your own kitchen garden and win the state award for best production of food.
A minister taunted.
I can. But there is a problem.
The minister said.
Problem?
The king exclaimed. The minister said,
Your Majesty, the grain must be sown and raised by a person who has never ever yawned in his life.
Is that a joke?
The king looked annoyed.
Have you ever seen a person who has never yawned in his life? It is a natural act.
Your Majesty, I didn't know that it was a natural act and everyone had to yawn. Our queen says that yawning is a big crime.
The king got the hint about what the minister was driving at. He nodded his head at the minister's wit. The king visited the queen's chamber that night to meet her and normalize the relations. Moral: talk and understand each other. Being patient and forgiving helps fix problems in relationships.